So this project is Purple Heart and Box Elder Burl. In the past, I've made a hair holder, ponytail holder for my girlfriend, and it wasn't big enough. And although the wood was very beautiful, it wasn't as striking as the burl that I'm going to use. So the first thing I do is simply some spindle turning, make the Purple Heart pin that goes through. Spindle work like this gives me the opportunity to focus on very fine manipulation of the tools and improve my tool control skills, as well as just come up with some very nice, refined shapes that I find quite pleasing. I finished this piece of spindle work with Axe Abrasive paste and then Axe Polishing and Restorative paste. The carnauba wax in the polishing and restoring paste hardens and is actually really well suited for an application such as a hairpin. This piece of Box Elder Burl came to me from Matt at Lost in the Green Studios. Matt sent it to me. He said he was stuck with what to do with it and hoped that I could find something that it would be appropriate for, and it turns out to be quite a beautiful piece of wood. So for the this piece, the actual ponytail holder itself, I don't finish it with Axe. In fact, I use Brad's Workbench. So I sand this up through 400, which I'll spare you. But as I apply the Brad's Workbench abrasive paste, I do slow it down a little so you can see how bright and colorful and just absolutely phenomenal the grain in this piece of burl is. The reason I use the Brad's, why I switched from Axe to Brad's, is simply because of the shape of this piece and because of the fact that ultimately it's going to have a hollow center. To use the woodturner's joke, it's going to be a funnel. I don't have a way to put the finish on it when I'm finally done using friction, which acts as a friction polish. Once there's a hole in the middle, it's really hard to hold it, as you'll see later. So what I do use is Brad's Workbench Tung Honey, which is a carnauba wax and tung oil concoction that Brad makes that is an outstanding finish, and I use it as often as I use Axe products. So again, this is a ponytail holder, and so one of the things it needs is a place for the hairpin to go through. I'm taping the wood first so that I don't get any chip out or tear out from the drill bit, and then I will drill the holes, widen them out a little, and hit it with a little 400 grit sandpaper to make sure the edges are pretty smooth. Of note here, I was unable to unscrew the piece from the woodworm screw. It was jammed. In my experience, what I found is that it's not the screw threads in the wood that jam. It is the pressure of the piece against the face of the chuck that causes it to be jammed so that you can unscrew it. As you'll see here, once I reverse it, put it into the chuck jaws, and then simply use a pair of pliers, I'm able to get the woodworm screw right out without any wax or any craziness. It's literally the friction between the face of the piece and the face of the chuck jaws that causes the issue where you can't unscrew it from the piece. So as I finish using the sander and go to the Brad's Workbench, I want to talk a little bit about two things. First of all, I did skip a lot of the hollowing because the more interesting part is here in a few minutes when I actually make my funnel. So that's one thing. I actually want to cover three things. Number two is I've discovered in making yarn bowls that the best method when you're drilling a hole in the side of a bowl is to drill from the outside in before you hollow the bowl. That way, when you turn the inside and you get to your thickness, you do not get tear out or chipping. Whereas if you push a drill through a thin wall, it will tear out or chip and you'll end up having to fix that. I've discovered that that works every time without fail. The other thing I want to talk about is the fact that the sides of this are very thin. So I left the middle intact. I didn't get all the way to where I wanted to go because I didn't want this piece to flex too much. And as you're going to see here momentarily, ultimately it's going to be hollow. There's going to be no center, which makes the sides even more flexible, especially at as thin as this is, which is roughly It's between an eighth and a 16th, 3/16 and an eighth of an inch. It's right in that area. It doesn't want to be, because it's for holding a ponytail, it's going to rest on the back of a person's head. You don't want it to be very heavy. So before I get it off the lathe and work on finishing the inside rim, I do a little test fit, make sure everything lines up the way it should. And thankfully I remembered to do it that way this time, so I wasn't trying to fix stuff after the fact. Next time, learn that one from experience. Make sure that everything works the way you want it to before you take things off the lathe. So here's where I kind of had a little bit of a brain fart and decided I was going to carve the center to get rid of the mortise that I had cut to mount it. And, you know, I forgot, you know, I'm a wood turner, and there's a way to hold this to turn it. I don't own cold jaws, so I usually have to figure out some other way. But as you'll see, I started to discover that it just wasn't, I wasn't cutting it neatly, and wasn't getting a round circle. So I had to figure out a different way to manage this. And then I remembered that although I don't have cold jaws, I'm certainly no stranger to the jam chuck. So I cut a mortise and then used a paper towel to jam the piece in, and then some painter's tape just to help make sure that it stayed. And ultimately I ended up, you know, what's funny is using a very light touch with the cutting tools, I didn't pop it out. But when I started sanding it, I popped it out, so I doubled my paper towel. And that had the appropriate effect of holding it while I finished sanding. So here you'll see me getting frustrated and then figuring out that I just needed to fold the paper towel in half and double it, and I had a good firm grip, and firm enough, in fact, that I didn't have to add the painter's tape. The other thing I could have done is put painter's tape around the rim and then used hot glue. That certainly would have been a very effective method. At this point, I could see the finish line and was, I guess, in a bit of a hurry. Again, with the Brad's Workbench, and then ultimately I put the Tung honey on, and here you have the finished piece, which turned out absolutely stunning. So thanks again to Matt from Lost in the Grain Studios for the wonderful piece of wood. And I have a few more chunks that we'll see come out here in the next few weeks.